Hello, and welcome to this week's Qredible live broadcast. We will be joined soon by our CEO and chairman, Brian Fitzpatrick, who's just having a little bit of technical difficulties at the moment. But this week, we're very excited to have David Paleschuck with us. David is the author of Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis, which was the very first book on cannabis branding. And he's here today to talk about his new book, Cannabis versus Marijuana, Language, Landscape, and Context. We're very excited to have you on the show today, David. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah. Hi, Taylor. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here. My background is somewhat varied, even though I've been in the cannabis industry now for 12 years, which seems like a lifetime. But I come from a creative background. I had gone to Parsons School of Design and studied product and industrial design, and then came out and owned an art and design gallery in New York City for 10 years. After which I went back to school for my MBA, and then when I came out of school with my MBA, I ended up working at American Express, MasterCard, Pepsi, and Microsoft. And during that time, learned quite a bit. I often sort of think about how credit card marketing and some of the other CPG marketing I've done and branding I've done, how that relates to cannabis. And it's taken me a while to figure that out, but I see how it does. And I'll just touch upon that quickly for a moment. Working at American Express and MasterCard, I learned quickly that branding and marketing in the credit card industry is really all about trust. And so whether it's Don't Leave Home Without It or the MasterCard's Priceless campaign, it's all about trust. It's trust us with your data, trust us with your finances, and probably most importantly, trust us that when you wave your card over a terminal or swipe it through a terminal, it's going to work. And so I've learned really quickly that cannabis branding and marketing is all about trust as well. And then when I was serving as a brand manager at Mountain Dew, and then from there went to Microsoft to Xbox, that was really all about lifestyle and lifestyle marketing. And if you think about cannabis, it truly is a balance of lifestyle marketing and trust marketing. So trust in the sense that we're using the right, or rather, we're not using pesticides in your cannabis. You can trust us to get a safe, clean product. And then on the other side of it, it's lifestyle marketing as well, and lifestyle branding, where it's all about what's cool, what's happening, what's hip, how does it relate to one's lifestyle, and become an accessory of sorts. So really, when I think about it, my background in action sports and in gaming and in credit card marketing have all really led to a better understanding of trust and lifestyle marketing, which is what cannabis branding and marketing is all about.
Yeah, as we've had this broadcast for the past couple of months, I've noticed just the overwhelming amount of experts from different industries, like how they bring those skills into cannabis. So it's really cool to see specifically how you do that. Specifically when it comes to language and trust. In your book, you talk a lot about language and the way that we use language in the cannabis industry and how it contributes to stigmas about the plant. So what specific language do you think that the industry uses that might impact public perception and trust of the plant and the industry at large?
And that's a great question, Dave. Before you move on, I'm here. You just can't see me. So
okay, great.
I've had some studio issues with our camera, so but I'm here. But go ahead and answer that great question.
Hey, Brian.
How you doing? Thanks for joining us, David. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sorry I don't get to see your beautiful smile, but nonetheless.
Well, I have been told I have a face for radio, so maybe it's working out better this way.
Well, you have a great voice for radio, so I'm glad to be chatting with you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, to jump on Taylor's question, in terms of words, I think words are really important. And I'll start off by saying the premise of my book, and I'll get into specific words and how they're used, but the premise of the book, my latest book, Cannabis versus Marijuana, Language, Landscape, and Context, is really about how do we build bridges? And if we are to normalize the plant, which seems to be the goal, it's certainly my goal, is to gain acceptance and normalize the plant. But if that's our goal, and we're here to either convince or convert folks that don't believe in the plant, then we really need to be mindful about how we start the conversation. And the words we use are really important in starting that conversation. And I'll throw one example up, just to sort of kick the door down. So I live in America, and I believe the two of you are both in Canada. But when we start to talk about gun control here in the U.S., those two words turn half the U.S. population off, gun control. But if we were to start off that conversation with responsible gun ownership, then we can talk about different aspects of owning a gun, believing in the Second Amendment, and open that conversation up for discussion and debate rather than shutting it down before we even get started. And so I believe that the words we use and the approach we take, first and foremost, has everything to do with who we're speaking to and what their perspective is. So if we're speaking about cannabis consumption and cannabis legalization, and we want to talk about normalizing the plant, I think it really behooves us to, one, figure out who we're talking to and where they sit on the spectrum of, canna core, canna curious, canna contra folks, and then start to use the words that most likely appeal to them or more likely appeal to them. And so who are those folks? Those folks are policymakers and politicians and researchers and doctors and nurses. And we need to start using words that they understand. And so one of the things that kicked this off for me, and the thought behind this, was I was in Olympia, Washington at the state capitol during a meeting. And I had expressed my thoughts during the meeting. And after the meeting, a politician came up to me and said, "You don't use marijuana, do you? Because you don't look like you do." And my response was, "I don't. I consume cannabis." And his head started spinning on his shoulders. And I think what he was looking for was the conversation that goes from use marijuana to abuse. And then the next thing you know, we're talking about the gateway drug, right? And we're having this conversation that we've all heard so many times. So he asked me what the difference was between marijuana and cannabis. He asked me what the difference was between using and consuming. And I started to explain to him that we're all consumers, whether we realize it or not, that on a daily basis we consume. We consume by making choices. We look at price, we look at value, we look at ingredients, we look at all sorts of things to make an informed decision about the things we consume. And so that was really the inception, or the starting point for the book, which was the words we use are really important. And it became very clear speaking to this 70 or so year old politician. He was not even aware of the racial baggage that the word marijuana has with it. And again, that depends on context, right? So where you are, but certainly in America, the word marijuana does have a lot of racial baggage tied to it. So the fact that one would say use versus consume, or marijuana versus cannabis, that was really just the starting point. And I've got so many other examples, but I'll leave it there for right now.
Well, it's interesting because, marijuana is, yes, I mean, it has sort of led to the stigmatization, but then you have the slang derivatives when you talk about weed and pot and bud and all these other things. I know that you've also talked about in your book. So, and then that leads to the worst things when they start talking about it like dope, and which leads back to that whole years of misinformation about cannabis. And and because of what was shed, because of the stigma of the essentially going back to the war on drugs, which you point out in your book. So how do we sort of get away from this and start making more of a positive contribution that relieves the stigma and push towards more mainstream and normalization?
Well, I think we have to be thoughtful, right? That thoughtful comes first. But the words we choose, and let me pause for a moment too. I want to make it clear that I'm not the word police, right? Since the book has come out over the last 3 weeks, I've had people on LinkedIn, for example, say, "What do you think about the word weed?" And my response to that is, I use the word weed, but I use it within a certain context and within a certain community. So it's just important to understand how and why we use words. And quite frankly, words are a double-edged sword. Words are both used by a community to create community and inclusion. As a former skateboarder, when I'm with my skateboard friends, we speak a certain way. We talk about skateboarding in a certain way. We talk about certain tricks. We use certain slang words and euphemisms, and that creates community. But the other side of that is words are used to marginalize people, and that is the double-edged sword. So it's really important to understand when to use words and what words to use within those settings. So context is everything. So I just want to make it clear, I'm not the word police. All I'm doing is making the point that it's important to think about who we're speaking to and what their perspective is. And once we understand that, then choose the right words. And it's not rocket science. It's just real communication, and it's being thoughtful about how we communicate and getting our points across. To just go a little bit deeper, there are other words like adult use versus recreational. I have a 14-year-old son, and he recreates every day after school, and I sure as hell hope he's not consuming cannabis, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or other words that are just really, really important to sort of think through. So these are the things that we should think through, and these are the things that are important as we start to normalize the plant.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And certainly I didn't think you were the word police, but I really liked what you were writing because you're really, I mean, you're an advocate for the industry and you're an advocate for the safety and the destigmatization of the industry. And quite frankly, like I tell my kids all the time, words matter. So it's about really understanding the context of these words. And the other thing that I'm sort of seeing, when we talk about the stigma and other factors that contributed to it, I think there's a lot of things that contribute to the stigma, and lack of quality controls and lack of research and a lot of disinformation that has existed for years is a big part of it. Because when I talk to people and they have these debates about it from lots of different communities, there's so much misinformation. It's just it's mind-boggling that they don't even understand that there's an endocannabinoid system, that phytocannabinoids contribute to your endocannabinoid system and the benefit that has. So part of what I'm seeing is that the restricted ability to, because this is this Schedule 1 status, right? It's constricted our ability to actually do proper research and uh, educate the public. So I think part of, I don't know, how do you feel about the fact that the fact that this thing is still sitting in Schedule 1 and has been a long time, and it limiting our ability to do research and this lack of consumer knowledge? What are your thoughts about how we turn this around and how we continue to move this forward? Because there's like a catch-22 dilemma that as long as it sits on Schedule 1, we can't research, and therefore we can't educate, and we can't put in the proper quality control measures, and it becomes an issue. So what are your thoughts about how we turn that around?
Well, my my thoughts are specific, and perhaps I don't. My my thoughts might not be as popular as I hope they would be. But here's my thought. My thought is that should the plan move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that will open up a number of different aspects for the industry. There's a few things it should do. If the 280E law goes away, then which is a tax law, then cannabis companies should be more profitable, and their margins should be greater. If their margins are greater and they're more profitable, then one would think that investors already in the market might be willing to throw more money into it, and new investors might come in. So I think that helps the industry as a whole, because right now the industry is not really making lots of money. They're generating lots of revenue and lots of taxes, and tax payments. So that's a good thing. But the folks in the industry are not really making money, despite what most of the outsiders think. So it's very tough right now in the industry. So hopefully that will loosen things up a little bit. More importantly, or as importantly, I believe there's the possibility of big pharma coming in to the industry, certainly doing research, certainly doing all the things that big pharma does, which, quite frankly, is lobbying, is regulating, is normalizing, is standardizing, is doing the research, which the folks in the cannabis industry, whether they can do it or not is really a different story, but they haven't done it. And so while I'm not a fan of big pharma, there's a part of me which thinks two things. One, if big pharma starts creating plant-based medicines, maybe big pharma will get closer to where I would approve of what it does. Secondly, maybe big pharma can get us over the hurdles that our industry has been facing for so long and hasn't been able to get us over. So I believe in normalization. I believe in standardization. I believe in regulation. I believe in responsible consumption. I believe in standard dosing. Right now, we've got in the US, in the state of Washington, a serving of THC is 10 megs. In Massachusetts, it's 5 megs. In the medical market in New Mexico, it's 50 megs. How does one get to a place of standardization and normalization and dosing, with different states having different rules and regulations? How do we get to a place where we can build brands across state lines? Why? Because brands are all about consistency. So we're really not to a place where we should be, which is really about consistent brands, consistent offerings, and consistency leads to safety and loyalty, but safety primarily.
Right. And I think that's part of the issue. So the absence of standardization, potency, dosing, quality assurance protocols, because of, and I do hate to say it. I mean, but the pharmaceutical side does start to add a little bit legitimacy, because it brings in some of the standard practice and some of the research. But I'm not a big fan of big pharma taking over entire industries as well. But I am a fan of the kind of research and standards that they can drive. So the restricted ability, I think, to conduct robust clinical trials, because we're sitting in the Schedule 1, and research on the therapeutic effects of cannabis, because, again, of the Schedule 1 status, has, I think, resulted in a dearth of scientific evidence and, a gap in scientific evidence and understanding of its true medical benefits. And I think that in of itself, the knowledge gap there, perpetuates the skepticism and the misconceptions and the stigma that surround the legitimacy of cannabis use for, I like to say, medicinal. When I talk about recreational, which I don't love that term, I like to call it wellness. All right. So what do you, because I use supplements for wellness. I mean, I use cannabis for wellness, and I don't use it to get high. So I use it for sleep, and I use it to control inflammation. So
Mhm.
those are the two areas that it's proven well for me. But without that sort of that legitimacy, then we're just stuck, I think, in this old marijuana world, the bad side of the business. So I think what you're doing is very important, because it's starting to align the right vocabulary, the right vernacular towards the legitimacy. So, but whose responsibility is it to sort of implement these changes, and how we can actually see this impact? We talked a little bit about big pharma, but what else can be done besides big pharma to move this forward?
Well, I think there's a few things, and just let me double down on big pharma for a moment. Big pharma, lobbies. Big pharma has lots of funds that go out. Those funds go to medical schools, to push certain courses and curriculum. Right now, I believe it's 13% of medical schools only barely touch upon cannabis. The majority don't, and I understand that as a Schedule 1, it's not something really that a school wants to teach, nor doctors want to learn about. But the fact that there is an endocannabinoid system within our bodies, the fact that there is knowledge to be had, and the fact that there is therapeutic and medicinal benefit from the plant for some, and the research needs to be done, for others on a broader um, view. I think it's really important. So there's a lot that big pharma can do for the industry, that can push things further, that can work its way through medical schools, that can really set up the knowledge base that's required by doctors. And nurses, in order for the plant to really be called medical. One of the things that I appreciate what you just said is you called it medicinal. I use the terms medicinal, therapeutic, or wellness. I don't use the term medical. And I don't use the term medical because, at least in the US, anything that's medical is prescribed by a doctor, distributed by a pharmacy, and covered by insurance. And
Right.
while there's plenty of people who have really fought a long time to call it medical marijuana or medical cannabis, which I believe has helped move things further down the road, I do feel that they do themselves a disservice by calling it medical, because we still have so much further to go. So I think that's just a huge point just to double down on.
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, even like you were talking about the healthcare providers, like I know that my doctor was very big on not prescribing, but telling me, look, you need to be on a multivitamin. You need some more vitamin D in your diet. And these are things I can just go to the vitamin store and buy. Like these are supplements. And and I think that you're right when you're calling this medical. Okay, here comes the insurance company, here comes the prescription, here comes the cost, in the scenario, which I don't think we really totally want to see that entire environment. But due to the limited scientific evidence and the legal ambiguities, the healthcare system and healthcare providers are very hesitant to recommend or even guide patients on medicinal cannabis. So when you look at the sort of the pharma side, you're right. I mean, they lead to a lot of the research and the benefits. So what is that balance where we can get sort of the good stuff with leaving some of the bad stuff that may hurt the industry from a pharma perspective? I don't know the answer, David, but I think it's a good, healthy combination of both could really help the industry advance.
I agree, and I think it's a combination of both. I don't think it will go all pharma, nor do I think it will stay all craft cannabis, for lack of a better way of saying it. As the industry is right now. You had asked, whose responsibility is this? I believe it's certainly everybody in the industry. In the industry's responsibility to normalize the plant. I think that's what we're all fighting for, or most of us are fighting for. And therefore, I think we all should be mindful of that. I also think those that consume, whether they're in the industry or not, should be mindful about the words they use as well, and use those words correctly when they're speaking to different folks. Like I said, if we're here to convince or convert, we need to use the right words. So I think there's a lot of people that could share this burden and push things forward, which would help the normalization of the plant for sure.
Well, I love what you said. Is it's the industry's responsibility, and I agree with that. So one of the things that we're doing, and I'm not from Canada. I'm from New Jersey, but Taylor is from Canada, and Taylor basically, I've been sharing with her a lot of what we're doing up in Canada, and she's been involved in a launch that we've had with the Cannabis Standards Alliance of Canada. Now, that's a nonprofit up in Canada, and we've just rolled all of our technology out with them. And one of the things that they're doing is, it's sort of like the industry gets tired of telling them what's quality, what we should be doing, what should be, but why don't you come together? And that's what they're doing in Canada. They're coming together and they're creating standards for testing. They're creating standards for this THC inflation issue that's going on. And they're deciding, how best to control the industry, and working together to advance this. So the Cannabis Standards Alliance of Canada, which will be officially making announcements in the next couple of weeks, CSAC is a certifying body for cannabis brands, and the membership is working on these quality standards for all this product testing. And we're releasing something called the Brand Hub, which provides proper education to consumers and finding and learning about these proper brands and these products. But the most important thing is the industry's coming together there through a nonprofit to develop standards and not waiting for big pharma, not waiting for to be told what to do. So I love what you said about that. In fact, I would love to sort of put your book out to the group and say, hey, we ought to start creating the glossary. Not that David wants to be the word police. We know he doesn't. But it's an important thing to talk about because words do matter. So, congratulations on the second book. I think the first book, which was, I think everybody should read your first book first, because it sort of talks about the industry as a whole, and it is really talking about that whole commercialization, and gives a good framework and definition for the industry. And then you built upon that with the second book. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you, and anything else you'd like to say about the book or the promotion of the work you do.
Yeah, well, thank you. You can find me pretty much and all the things I do on brandingbud.com, which is both my brand consultancy, Branding Bud Consulting Group, and I'm always on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty much at most of the cannabis events around the world. I try to get around as much as I can. I just came back from a great event in Thailand, and some recent events here in the US. So yeah, the work I do is really to normalize the plant. That's really what I focus on. As you just said, my first book was really focused on branding. I speak about various brands, various form factors, the 14 cannabis brand archetypes, which relate to consumers. We're all, at the end of the day, we're all consumers, as I've said earlier, and we need to find out what consumers' issues are, and how do we solve their problems and bring solutions to them. So my second book was really, as I said, about the words we use, and words in branding, or the use of words in branding and marketing, are very similar. It's funny how many of the comments I've gotten really come down to, why this book versus your first book. And I think they're very similar and along the same lines. We just need to better understand the plant and figure out how to best to serve it up. And that's really what I do. So feel free to reach out to me again at david@brandingbud.com or on LinkedIn. I'm always open, and I'm always interested in learning other people's perspectives and some of the issues that they face in the industry.
David, congratulations on the second book and the great work you're doing. It's always an honor to talk to smart people and folks that are sort of helping to pioneer and pave the way and help make this industry legitimate and safe. So kudos to you. Thanks for being on the show. And I hope to stay in touch with you because there's a lot of stuff we're working on that I think we could use your help on. So thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks, Taylor. Bye-bye.